You're listening to Out Loud and Live with J.C. Alvarez. Television heartthrob John Wesley Shipp has always been an audience favorite on both daytime and primetime. His Emmy-winning turns on soaps have marked him one of the most versatile actors in the industry. John Wesley Shipp has gone on to featured roles on NYPD Blue and Dawson's Creek, but the role that put him on the fast lane to fanboy appreciation was his turn as the original Scarlet Speedster in the 90s hit show The Flash. His career now moving into an entirely new sector, John Wesley Shipp dropped by the studio to bring us up to speed on his current going-ons. Here now is John Wesley Shipp. And I have the pleasure of being joined by daytime heartthrob John Wesley Shipp. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for sitting with me, John.
You bet.
Now you're back in New York City. You began your career in New York City as an actor, correct?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I did.
In soap operas. That's really your claim to fame.
Yeah, actually, the first thing that signaled the end of my having to wait tables, which is still to this date the most terrifying job I've ever had. I don't have actor nightmares. I have waiter nightmares. All the food's coming up in the kitchen, and I don't know who it goes to. You know, and the chef is screaming and throwing knives. But I digress. The first thing really was I did Showtime's first original content movie. And it was The Dirtiest Show in Town by Tom Ian. They did a best of off-Broadway series, Me and My Girl, Passion of Dracula, and The Dirtiest Show in Town. And that was the one I did. In fact, the next month I got Guiding Light, good guy Kelly Nelson, and they kept getting letters from people who had seen this rather scandalous piece on Showtime. How could Procter and Gamble cast? They ignored it, and Kelly
and
was
that's
a
where you got
success.
your biggest following on daytime when you were on Guiding Light, correct?
In the beginning, yeah, I did 4 years on Guiding Light, and as a really good guy, the guy that every girl's mother would want her to be with. You know, I ran around singing "You Needed Me" in my Speedo. You know, I wore a Speedo, and then I sang "You Needed Me," and then I sang "You Needed Me" in my Speedo, and I figured, well, now I'll be fired. What else do they want from me? But they kept finding things. But then I got the opportunity immediately after that. Doug Marland, who had created the character of Kelly, went to As the World Turns, and he wrote the story of Douglas Marland, which I came in as the answer to Julianne Moore, who played Franny, to the answer of all her problems. I was the man of her dreams, and we were going to fall in love. And then it was quite an intricate story. I won't go into it. People who know it, it's one of the most revered three-pronged stories. Nobody suspected me, and nobody put the other two prongs to the story together. So the boards lit up when they discovered it was me. And you'll appreciate this as a journalist. Soap opera. My name was profaned in the halls of Soap Opera Digest because they had just done a whole sit down with me, and of course I could give no indication that I was only on like an 8-month contract because that would have given the story away. What did they want me to do? But they felt that they were talking about my returning to daytime and doing this whole, and I did it like I was back for good, and I gave no hint that I was just on for a short time. Apparently that upset them, but they got over it because by the time I came back to do Eddie Ford, they were really nice to me over there.
Now, daytime television has always been considered sort of like the actor's boot camp. So many fantastic actors come out of working the daytime television circuit. Did you learn a lot honing your craft within the arena of the soap opera world?
I certainly did, but I would say you better have your act together by the time you get to daytime because it's really a training ground in going with your first instincts and in memorizing a lot of dialogue in a short period of time. But if you don't know how to break down a script, if you don't know how to approach it, so that I mean, you'll go down in flames.
Because the turnaround is really quickly in daytime television. I mean, it's why actors really have to be like on their top of their game.
You consider it takes in Flash, for example, we had 9-day shoots per episode, 2 units shooting.
Flash, of course, being the show you did in the 90s, primetime television. We're going to get to that.
So, I mean, but we're 9-day shoots, 2 units shooting simultaneously to get an hour of television. And in daytime, we were doing 5 hours of television a week. You know, so it was a different animal. I always qualify that because I don't, it's a training ground, you know what I mean? But Helen Hayes is attributed to Helen Hayes. She's some of the finest acting is done in daytime, and I would say also some of the worst, and that's the nature of the beast.
Well, we won't talk about those because you are a coveted Emmy Award-winning actor for your daytime roles. You actually hold 2 Emmys for your work in 2 different soap operas,
right?
Which is really rare.
Yeah, a friend of mine in L.A. called me up one day. He's a real crossword puzzle fanatic and quiz shows. And he said, "Oh, my God, you're a question on Jeopardy!" You know, he's the only actor to have won 2 consecutive Emmys from 2 different daytime shows. I said, "Did they get the?" I said, "What was the category?" Soap operas. I said, "Did they get it?" He said, "No." I said, "Oh man!"
But you know what not a lot of people know is because of course everyone attaches you to so many of your roles on television is that you're really a singer. You're a vocalist. You actually recorded music. You studied music, and it's you actually performed music on Guiding Light.
A lot. I sang a lot on Guiding Light. In fact, we did an album. It was a album of rather insipid ballads. No, I was working with a producer from the ABBA organization, and we sold out the first pressing in the soap magazines. And then after that, there was some people from the ABBA organization came over. They wanted me to go to Sweden, but it wasn't really a direction musically that I wanted to go in. So
it was a pop album, and you are, of course, a classically trained singer.
Yeah, and you know what? There's some good tracks, like The Prisoner from Cell Block H, that theme song, And when you stop and you consider, I sang You Needed Me ad nauseum on Guiding Light, but it's Les Paul on the guitar, and we wrote that arrangement together when it goes from 4/4 into 3/4. So it was, and gave it a nice lift at the end, which I also probably one of the only people ever to sing on Donahue. It's like he was really desperate that day. He didn't know what to do with this bank of soap opera actors that he was interviewing. But
your fans from one of your other hit shows probably don't even know what Donahue is.
I know, and it was even in Chicago then. It's before it moved, so this is we're talking way back.
And the show, of course, that I'm referring to is Dawson's Creek. Dawson's Creek was a groundbreaking show on television, not only because it had such an interesting collection of actors, these young upstarts, these actors that no one really knew anything about yet that are now huge names, Katie Holmes, James Van Der Beek, Michelle Williams were among that cast. Did they feel special to you when you were working with them on Dawson's Creek?
I'm going to go back to As the World Turns, because
are you?
I do want to say,
Look how he takes over my interview.
That what was fortunate about that, and I chased so many rabbits telling that story, I'm not surprised you moved on. But let me just go back and say what was important to me career-wise was immediately after 4 years as a really good guy, I got to play a psychopath and win my first Emmy. And then I played a woman abuser and won my second Emmy. So immediately I wasn't stuck in, even though they were shorter duration roles.
Playing the good guy.
I went from good guy to stark raving mad in a matter of like a year, 2 years. So, and that's been a pattern for my career. I say, I played superheroes and psychopaths ever since. Super dads. And I want to put a linchpin in that, because that's going to actually wrap up my interview and come back to what you just started. So after that, you played Dawson's dad on Dawson's Creek, which became a show with Harvey Firestein. Yes, on Broadway, Safe Sex. Right, because you kept on. Of course, you kept a working actor. You were doing a lot of things, of course, theater and stuff. And then I went to do Neverending Story 2 in Germany, and I filmed that. It was so curious. We did the interiors in Munich, and we did the exteriors 4 months later in Vancouver. So it was very interesting. It's like anything that was like up to the bookshop. Everything outside was Vancouver. The minute you walk through the door, it's Munich, and they cut it together through the magic of filmmaking. Of course. I thought it was very interesting being a young man in my career. And then Hank McCann, legendary, mentioned in the movie The Player. He was my manager at the time, and he said, "You have to come to L.A." And I did a project, an episode of a show that Jack Scalia was doing, and that's where I met my good friend Beth Broderick, and we've remained friends ever since. And I got to come in, and I was an artist who came into my opening and slashed all of my paintings with a machete. And they were That's a good intro. That was and I went from that to being a superhero. So, But don't bring up Flash yet. I'm not. No, we don't know anything about it. You're already pirating my interview. Oh, sorry. You got to rein me in, because I will. Well, and I shall do my best. But, it's like, I really want to speak to your fandom and sort of like how your fandom has changed during the course of your career. And how it still continues to grow. But Dawson's Creek, which was, as I mentioned before, a really, really special show on television, especially because you were one of the veteran actors on the show, working with this new cast of young actors. Did they feel special? The entire project felt special. They shot the pilot presentation with a different dad. I was not the original guy cast. I was in Moab, Utah for a month with David Carradine, Lee Majors, Kathy Lee Crosby, and Michelle Green, who I primarily had my story with. There with our one stoplight and our one motel for a month, going, stir crazy. And they had filmed this little pilot presentation. They decided to go in a different direction with the dad. I was back in L.A., and they said, watch it. And I knew right away that people forget, because it was, as happens with all, I don't have to tell you, all pop cultural hits, they become cliche very quickly because there are a million copycats. But at the beginning, there was nothing that looked and sounded like Dawson's Creek.
No, of course not. And written by Kevin Williamson.
Written by Kevin
who
Williamson.
created the show.
And the first 2 years, we were the editor's pick, critically acclaimed Dawson's Creek. People tend to forget that.
It became the voice of its generation.
Yeah.
It really did, yeah.
At one point, I think Glenn Close said to Kevin, kids don't talk like that. And he said, no, but they'd like to. He turned out to be right.
Because oftentimes, in your role of Mitch Leary, is that right?
Mitch Leary, yeah.
Mitch Leary on Dawson's Creek. You often found yourself where Dawson was kind of like schooling you in a way.
Yeah.
There were these great moments where, like, he would almost turn the tables on Dad and teach you a lesson, and in reverse, then you would come back with teaching him a lesson, which is what made you such an endearing character on the show.
Well, I don't want to go into Kevin Williamson's psychology, but I really believe that what the unique voice was Kevin's, and Dawson. The whole show revolved around a sort of unlikely young leading man, this very sort of internal, analytical, intellectual guy that was just a little bit sort of off center.
That hero had never been done before.
No. We were coming into the landscape of 90210. In fact, the first thing I said when they talked to me about it was, I said, well, what's it going to be? Is it going to be, you may have to edit this out. He said, I promise you, because I said it was going to be a kid's show, how much are we going to have to do? He said, you will have independent, intersecting, subsidiary, but independent storylines. Right. And what's going on in the youth story will be reflected in what's going on in the adult story, and they'll inform each other. He said, I promise I won't turn you into 90210 parents. Right. And so, and he didn't. I mean, the hurricane episode, third episode of the first season, is a great piece of television writing, And you asked me about the kids. It was such an interesting. It was an interesting environment because, as you say, at the beginning, I was the most well-known actor on the show, and I had come in. They were already filming the second episode, and I came in and reshot the scenes from the pilot, and then began the second episode. It's like, I walked onto the set, and I met Katie, and she was there the first day, and I met Mary
Katie
Margaret.
Holmes.
Right, Katie Holmes. And then they said, okay, open your shirt and lay down on your back of the coffee table. And here comes Mary Margaret. I'm like, hi, how are you?
And you're like, just another day on the job.
Yeah. I mean, then we were making out and all this stuff, and wacky, crazy things happened because they were always playing.
Did she feel like she got an upgrade? Did she ever make a comment like, whoa, I got an upgrade?
No. She was very fond of the actor who preceded me.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, he went on. I was watching a movie with one of my personal favorites, idols, Al Pacino, and there he is. I'm like, oh, fine. I got Dawson's Dead, and you got a movie with friggin' Pacino.
Well, I mean, it's like, but still, I mean, it's like, it's these are shows you've been a part of television history, and that's the interesting part of your career in shows that have colored popular culture. Dawson's Creek was one of the first shows on television that actually touched on and played really intimately with one of its prominent characters coming out. The character of Jack McPhee, who was on the football team, correct? Wasn't Jack a football player?
No.
Okay, he was played by Keir Smith, right?
He was played by Keir
Right.
Smith, and
Right.
The setup was, and this is what I loved about third season, I had forgotten, the whole construct around, he just happened to be whatever he was doing out on the football field, and the ball went over off.
Yes.
And he caught it.
And he catches
and threw it
right.
back, and Mitch goes to him.
Right, exactly.
And he says, I want you to join the team.
Right.
And he says, are you kidding me, a gay kid on the team? I said, you shouldn't let that, one thing has nothing to do with the other. And Jack says, in a perfect world, maybe, but not in Cape Side. And then Mitch talks him into not letting that be a barrier. Right. And by saying, you know, I really could use a win right now, and I think you could too. And he talks Jack into being on the team. And sociologically, I thought that was very important. I'm glad that I was a part of that.
Yeah. And certainly you have to, you know, at the time that this storyline was evolving, I mean, it was making all the news pages. You have to imagine, as the veteran actor on the set, did Smith come up to you and say, you know, hey, Shipp, what do you think? How do you think I should approach this character, and how do you think this is going to affect my career? Did he have any reservations and come to you for advice?
Kerr did not know when he was cast. In fact, I don't know whether Kevin knew or not.
Well, the character was actually associated with Katie Holmes' character.
That's right.
It wasn't true. They were actually dating for a short period of time.
So I think it was either the end of his first season there that Kevin presented him with this story, and being a young actor, and we were kind of. A wonderful thing about doing it was we were in Wilmington, North Carolina. I think that we were sort of saved by, and the kids were sheltered at the beginning. The kids, I don't mean to, you know, these
they were kids then. They were young people then. Now they're, of course, adult actors, but they were young people then.
But they were sheltered in an environment there. We were sort of like a family. And I remember when James came to Mary Margaret and said, "Oh, I signed my first autograph," or when Varsity Blues went to #1, he wanted his mom and dad weren't there, so he wanted his set mom and dad to go with him to see. So we went with him to see Varsity Blues in Wilmington. You know, it was very cute like that. We all hung out on the weekends and on boats and jet skis and stuff, and it really was for the first couple of years, I think.
And talk about brilliant casting. I mean, it's like, you know, the two of you really looked like you know, son and dad and son, and like, you know, it was a brilliant piece of casting for television.
I had friends from high school say, you know, his reactions. He said it's not so much that you look alike, although you do, but he says you react to things the same way. A certain way, you'll laugh and turn your head. It was eerie because, you know, James never studied me, and I never studied him. It was just something that we had. And as you say, kudos to the casting people.
Right. But do finish the story of
Kerr.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Well, you know, he was concerned, of course, and he was surprised that his character was going to be going in this direction, and you know, he had reason to be, as it turned out later. But we'll get to that later. When you maybe ask the question, I don't know. Maybe I'll wait. I don't know. No. Kerr came to me and he said he was very thoughtful. He said, "Did you hear what's?" I ran into him. I don't know if he came to me or not, but I ran into him on the lot or trailers. And he said, "No." He said, "Did you hear what's happening with Jack?" And I said, "Yeah, I hear that Kevin is going to tell a gay storyline." And he said, "Yeah." I said, "How do you feel about that?" He said, "Well, I don't know. You want to go would you come and have lunch with me?" And so he wanted to talk to me about it, and you know, he was concerned on a couple of levels. I said, nobody can make the decision but you. But I know this. I know that if you do it, you will get the best that Kevin Williamson has to offer, because this is a story that he wants to tell.
Right.
And if you
That's wonderful. The actor giving the perspective of saying, if the creator is writing this, he has confidence in you that you can do it. Have confidence in him.
Have confidence in him.
To evoke this character, to bring this character across.
We all know what a great writer he is. Right. You will be getting the best of the best if you do it. If you don't, chances are Jack will recede. You know, I mean, that's just you know, the facts. Because what's he going to do with Jack? I mean, you know, I said. Secondly, I said, if you do it. Oh, no. The second thing I said is, and as far as your career is concerned, I said, and this might upset some people, but it was based on my observation. I said, Kerr, if you're not gay in this business climate, you have nothing to fear from playing a gay character.
Right.
Sort of like the double standard. You know, if you were gay and played a gay character, they'd say, "Oh, he's just playing himself." On the other hand, if you were straight playing a straight character, you would that would never come up. Right. You know.
And of course, go ahead. I'm sorry, you were going to say?
Yeah. So I told him, you know, I said, so that's my opinion about that. And I said, and if I may cross the line, because people said, did you give them advice? I said, oh God, I hope not. I said, that would have been insufferable. They were all, I mean, James had worked with, Who's Afraid of Edward Albee, done a play with Edward, please.
Right.
You know,
well, they were all talented actors. I mean, to be assembled in that way, but I mean, who knew that they would move on to that and and be Oscar nominated. I mean, Michelle Williams was nominated for her performance in Brokeback Mountain, and now she's going back to Broadway, and it's amazing the crop of actors that came out of that one show that you were part of. So,
and I think one reason maybe that the chemistry that you alluded to earlier about how Dawson and Dad would switch roles was because I didn't come on as that kind of an actor. I would have been embarrassed. In fact, our kids, we didn't have some of the temperamental behavior when they became overnight stars because our actors were smarter than that.
Yes.
It would have embarrassed them. Your trailer's an inch longer than mine, so I'm not coming to the set. There was none of that. They were too intelligent from the beginning.
Well, because that show is one of the most well-written coming-of-age stories on television.
They cast it very intelligently. I want to say one more thing, but I did cross the line with Kerr, and I said, Kerr, if I can be so bold as to give you a word of advice, if you do this character, don't be careful. I said, you'll do what you do and decide to do. I said, but my word would be, don't go, I didn't say don't. I said, be careful about going on interviews asserting your heterosexuality and apologizing
good advice, yes. Right.
because that will insult your head writer.
Right.
You know, it's like, I'm not really, so, and he was very thoughtful. Kerr's a great guy. He's very thoughtful. He took it all in. And I have to say,
and did a beautiful job.
Are we allowed to curse on this show?
Of course, yeah.
A shitstorm was kicked up around this show, and Kerr handled it, I thought,
because it became very controversial.
Perfectly.
Yeah, it was. They were picketing on the set.
Busloads.
Yeah.
In fact, one night, I mean, there would be picketing and shouting and signs, and we shot really late one night, and about 2 or 3 in the morning, there we are in the Dawson Leary living room, and sirens go off, and James went, "It's the Baptists." It was a car accident.
Which is really frightening.
Stuff. Really scary stuff.
And it goes on to such a to the testament of the show that the character did evolve really well up until the final seasons of the show. You unfortunately were killed off.
You know what? You say unfortunately. It was at the end of the 4th season. Once Kevin left the show began to evolve. Yeah. Now, I'm very glad that Mitch became the least motivated man in Capeside, albeit, becomes the football coach. Right, but, the fact that I got to participate in doing a story that basically says to kids, don't let whoever you are block you from exploring your talents and abilities, with the Jack, gay football player thing.
With Dawson, who had great aspirations and wanted to be bigger than he was such an ambitious young character.
Right. And I just totally blanked on the point that I was going for.
You were saying of how...
it's gone.
And
maybe
then
it'll come back.
And then we were talking about when you left the show.
Why I left the show. Right.
I'll have much more with my friend John Wesley Shipp in part 2 of our interview, when he takes us behind the scenes, on the set, and in the cowl of the Flash, and reveals his take on the new guy stepping into the suit. So keep it here and get out loud. Stay in the know with Edge on the Net, the internet's largest network for LGBT news and entertainment. Download the iPad app and get the digital magazine featured every month. Edge on the Net. Visit us now. Out Loud and Live is now also available as a podcast on iTunes.
Please hang up and try again.
Send us your questions or comments to thrillseekerhq@aol.com. This is JC Alvarez, and you've been listening to Out Loud and Live. This is a Thrillseeker HQ presentation. Get in the HQ. Go to www.thrillseekerhq.com.